Well, Bill and Sade, accepting a plea agreement would mean that Sean Combs would have to admit to trafficking and force. And today he made it very clear that was not going to happen. Diddy maintained all along these encounters involved consenting adults and plans to take his chances that a jury agrees.
Difficult to reflect on the darkest times in your life. Sometimes you got to do that. I was fucked up. I hit rock bottom, but I make no excuses. My behavior on that video is inexcusable. I take full responsibility for my actions in that video.
Alright, lean in, because we need to talk about something wild happening right now. Picture this, one of the biggest names in music, a mogul whose empire spans records, fashion, and spirits, walks into a federal courtroom facing charges that could effectively end his life as he knows it. But instead of a somber, silent entrance, the first thing you hear are courtroom laughs, even jokes from the judge himself about the sheer number of aliases this man has used over the years, and how the jury forms were longer than epic fantasy novels. It feels bizarre, almost surreal. This was the scene as Sean Diddy Combs recently entered a Manhattan courthouse. But don't let the initial awkward humor fool you. This wasn't just a minor legal inconvenience. This was the opening act of a high-stakes federal criminal trial, a brutal fight for freedom and fortune where the government alleges years of darkness hid behind the glitz and glamour. This is the story of a legend staring down his most intense legal challenge ever, and what's coming out in court is absolutely explosive.
I'm disgusted. I was disgusted then when I did it. I'm disgusted now. I went and I sought out professional help. Got to go into therapy and go into rehab. Had to ask God for his mercy and grace.
Because once the brief, strange moments of courtroom levity passed, the full, grim weight of the situation crashed down. Sean Combs wasn't just answering questions, he was staring down the barrel of the most serious accusations imaginable. 5 felony charges handed down by federal prosecutors. This moves far beyond civil lawsuits. This is the US government alleging criminal conduct. The charges are damning, fundamentally accusing him of running a disturbing, years-long operation. We're talking about accusations including transporting individuals across state lines for what the government alleges were illicit purposes, using his power, influence, and resources to manipulate, pressure, and control young women. The core claim is that Diddy orchestrated what prosecutors are calling an exploitation enterprise, a calculated scheme operating under the radar for years, designed not just for personal gain, but to fuel his massive empire and protect his carefully crafted public image. They allege he used a playbook involving lavish gifts, cross-country trips on private jets, or tricked out tour buses, and pressure tactics, all while hiding these alleged activities behind layers of loyal staff, opaque shell companies, and those notorious ironclad non-disclosure agreements. This isn't just about past bad behavior, according to the government. It's about an organized system they claim was built to facilitate and conceal serious misconduct that spanned from roughly 2016 to 2020.
I'm so sorry. But I'm committed to be a better man each and every day. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm truly sorry.
And the prosecution isn't holding back. They are laying out a detailed blueprint of their case, telling the court they have overwhelming evidence that paints a picture of calculated control and alleged criminal behavior, not consensual relationships. Assistant U.S. Attorney Rachel Collins told the court that jurors will see a clear pattern laid out through a mountain of evidence. This includes detailed bank records, travel logs, flight plans from his private jet broker, guest lists from exclusive nightclubs, and even facial recognition data to confirm who flew where and when. They also have the powerful testimony of first-hand witnesses. Court documents mention 3 main accusers by their initials and hint at least 8 more witnesses are lined up to speak. Plus, there's a significant amount of digital evidence, like screenshots from encrypted messages and rideshare receipts that they argue place people in specific locations at crucial times. All of this, they claim, works together to show an organized, strategic scheme. And if the government proves their case, the consequences for Diddy are staggering. He has pleaded not guilty to every single charge, but if convicted on the top counts, he faces the very real possibility of a life sentence. Beyond losing his freedom, he stands to lose immense wealth. The government is seeking a massive $140 million forfeiture, targeting not just his fancy Beverly Hills mansion and a Long Island estate, but also the masters to his Bad Boy Records catalog, the very foundation of his musical legacy. They are, in essence, aiming to completely dismantle his empire from the ground up, stripping away both his liberty and his fortune.
The last hearing before Sean Combs' trial starts, when he walked into federal court today, he appeared to be looking for his family. They've pretty much been at all of the hearings that I've been to, but there was no presence of his sons or his mother or his sister who had previously been at those hearings.
But Sean Combs and his defense team are not going down without a brutal fight. His lawyer, Benjamin Brafman, is known for his aggressive courtroom tactics, and he is hitting back hard against the government's narrative. Combs insists that all the interactions mentioned in the case were completely consensual, and his legal team maintains that the prosecution is taking adult relationships and twisting them into something criminal for headlines and leverage. Brafman claims that what the government is portraying as a criminal enterprise is simply the reality of flashy living and managing relationships in the high-pressure, high-profile world of entertainment, and that the indictment itself is stitched together from rumors, personal vendettas, and stretched-out stories fueled by people seeking financial payouts. They are challenging the timelines the government presents and questioning the credibility and motives of the accusers. His defense strategy also includes arguing that financial transactions the prosecution points to as evidence of a conspiracy are actually just routine business practices in the music industry. Things like standard non-disclosure agreement settlements and payments to short-term consultants, all above board and properly disclosed in IRS filings. They are bringing in their own forensic accountants ready to testify that no sketchy money was moved or hidden in the books, trying to normalize the very payments the government calls suspicious.
So here's what came out of today's hearing. Number one, the government acknowledged that they offered Combs a plea deal. Combs acknowledged he has no interest in taking that. They're going to move forward with the trial.
As the legal battle intensifies, specific jaw-dropping details have emerged about key pieces of potential evidence and unexpected witnesses. One of the most significant revelations is that a former associate of Combs who reached a major, privately negotiated agreement with him last year, widely reported to be singer Cassie Ventura, has now been subpoenaed by the government for potential rebuttal testimony. This could be a game changer, potentially bringing a key figure back into the legal spotlight after a settlement was thought to have closed that chapter. But that wasn't the only insider shocker. It was revealed that two of Combs' former bodyguards have allegedly flipped, cooperating with the government in exchange for immunity. One is expected to testify about a disturbing red code protocol they claim was used to confiscate phones at Combs' parties, while the other reportedly claims he delivered cash-filled envelopes to mysterious drop-off spots. Allegations that could lend weight to the conspiracy claims. Adding fuel to the fire, the prosecution is bringing in a financial forensics expert whose deep dive into thousands of Combs' company transactions allegedly uncovered over $30 million, leaving via cashier's checks labeled vaguely as consulting or event advance to individuals with no apparent legitimate service contracts. Her report also reportedly tracked $7.6 million wired from Bad Boy Touring to an offshore account, which the government claims later funded the purchase of that luxury Beverly Hills mansion now targeted for seizure. The battle over evidence admissibility is also heating up, particularly concerning a disputed 2019 audio recording from a studio session where Diddy allegedly became angry after a woman tried to leave a private party, an exchange the defense argues is misleading and irrelevant, but the prosecution wants the jury to hear. Then there are the hotel security logs from major spots in Miami Beach, Vegas, and LA that the government has subpoenaed, which supposedly track room key usage by Combs and several accusers on nights lining up with the indictment allegations. If these logs check out, legal analysts say it could be damning, potentially showing the accusers and Diddy were together in lockdown locations just before the alleged incidents.
They also talked about the jury selection process, which one legal expert I spoke to said is probably the most important thing that you want to pay pay close attention to before the actual trial starts.
The courtroom itself has become a battleground, not just of evidence, but of legal strategy and procedural clashes. One of the first major points revealed was that Diddy reportedly turned down a plea deal offered by the prosecution, making his intention to fight these charges in front of a jury absolutely clear. His defense team is waging a fierce war on what evidence will even be allowed. They filed motions to suppress evidence seized during the dramatic March raids on Combs' homes in LA and Miami, arguing those searches were overly aggressive and violated his rights. There were heated exchanges over the witness list, with the defense accusing the prosecution of ambushing them with names that only emerged after the raids, though the judge quickly shut down that argument, stating the government is within its rights to reveal witness lists after jury selection. Both sides are also fighting tooth and nail over expert testimony. The prosecution wants to bring in a clinical psychologist to educate the jury on concepts like trauma bonding and the dynamics of alleged manipulation in relationships involving power imbalances. In contrast, the defense wants to use a music industry consultant to explain common practices like non-disclosure agreements, attempting to normalize financial settlements and contracts that the government points to as evidence of covering up alleged misconduct. In a surprising move, the defense is also reportedly considering introducing testimony from a psychiatrist suggesting that Combs' mental capacity might have been affected by drugs or alcohol, potentially impacting his ability to commit the alleged crimes. An argument the prosecution is strongly disputing, trying to prevent this line of defense from reaching the jury. The judge is trying to keep a tight rein on these battles, warning both sides against turning the trial into a circus of character assassinations, stating that impeachment can't become a trial within a trial.
And thirdly, we learned that Combs will be adding 2 new attorneys to his defense team. And just to recap, Combs, who is 55 years old, could spend the rest of his life behind bars if convicted on sex trafficking and racketeering. He has pleaded not guilty to all charges.
The legal pressure isn't confined to the courtroom. It's having massive, visible repercussions on Combs' vast empire and public image. The wave of civil lawsuits filed against him since November 2023, containing shocking accusations of emotional control, violence, and disturbing behavior at parties described as freak-offs, are currently paused to avoid interfering with this criminal trial. But the damage is already being felt. Diddy has reportedly handed control of several business arms, like Sean John and Revolt Media, to temporary managers, and advertisers are already pulling back from Revolt. His lucrative liquor deal with Diageo is reportedly done. The impact is even reaching his music catalog. Reports indicate Spotify saw a drop in his monthly listeners, and his Sean John fashion label has paused new collections. Financial analysts are warning that if streaming platforms start pushing his catalog down the ranks, his earnings could take a serious hit. Beyond the business world, the IRS has reportedly jumped into the fray, conducting a separate audit digging into suspicious income streams, particularly tied to those infamous parties. A memo filed quietly in court hints at potential unreported cash flows, and the IRS has told the court it might file a restitution claim if Combs is convicted, adding potential tax woes to his already overwhelming legal problems. The intense media coverage, logging tens of thousands of mentions online and broadcast, and the public pressure are also significant factors. Outside the courthouse, protest groups like Silence Breakers have been demonstrating, standing with signs reading "Justice for Survivors," sometimes even while a small group of fans plays old bad boy hits nearby. This media storm is making jury selection incredibly difficult, with the judge acknowledging the challenge of finding jurors who haven't been influenced by the extensive hype and prior high-profile cases. To manage this, the judge has ruled that the jury will be anonymous and partially sequestered to protect them from external pressures, and he has banned cameras from the courtroom, allowing only courtroom sketch artists to document the proceedings.
I think they're going to try and say that Diddy's mental capacity could not make it possible for him to commit these crimes, claiming that maybe drugs or alcohol could have been at fault.
The judge presiding over the case, Judge Aaron Subramanian, appears more frequently towards the end, is actively working to control the narrative within the courtroom and ensure a fair trial amidst the media frenzy. He has issued several key rulings to shape what the jury will hear and how it will be presented. Importantly, he ruled that the jury will hear about past civil settlements involving Combs and accusers, but critically, they will not be told the dollar amounts involved, attempting to prevent potential bias. He also specifically banned the phrase "hush money, directing both sides to refer to these as privately negotiated agreements instead, in response to security concerns, particularly after social media threats were mentioned by federal marshals. Extra measures are in place, and juror candidates were reportedly walked through a separate entrance to avoid the protesters outside. The judge is also pushing the legal teams to move faster with jury selection, noting that stalling will cost you and that court resources aren't endless, a sign of the complexity and potential length of this process. Meanwhile, the defense is attempting to counter the prosecution's evidence at every turn. They claim screenshots of encrypted messages are just normal back and forth, not evidence of control, and that the rideshare data is handpicked to fit a one-sided story. They also plan to argue that some of the claims fall outside the 10-year statute of limitations for the most serious charges, although prosecutors counter that the alleged conspiracy was active until early 2024, which would reset the legal timeline. Diddy himself has largely remained quiet in court, only confirming that he understands the charges against him, dressed in ordinary suits rather than jail clothes, as specially approved by prison officials, highlighting the unusual nature of a high-profile defendant facing such severe allegations.
Apparently, a couple of weeks ago, the prosecution offered Diddy a plea deal, which he turned down. We don't know the details of what that plea deal entailed, but he said he's not taking it. This is coming after they've added additional charges, like the second superseding indictment.
So, as jury selection continues to crawl along, attorneys meticulously vet candidates with that extensive 120-question survey, trying to find an impartial panel amidst a sea of public opinion. As of very recently, only a limited number of jurors have been provisionally cleared from a pool of hundreds. Key rulings on which expert witnesses will be allowed to testify and what specific evidence, like the contested audio tape or rated digital files, can be presented are expected just before opening statements. Those opening statements are tentatively scheduled for around mid-May, once 12 jurors and 6 alternates are finally locked in. From there, the trial itself is expected to be lengthy, potentially lasting weeks or even months, with the prosecution alone saying they need 4 weeks just to present their case, and the defense getting the same amount of time if they call witnesses. The stakes couldn't be higher. If convicted, Diddy faces a minimum of 15 years and the potential for a life sentence, with his assets targeted for massive forfeiture. Should he be found guilty, a second forfeiture phase and a long present-tensing review would follow, likely dragging on for months. Any appeals would head to the Second Circuit Court, the same court that upheld the R. Kelly conviction based on similar racketeering arguments. The legal road ahead is long and incredibly complex, shrouded in uncertainty.
You know that Cassie video where you see Diddy dragging her in a hotel from 2016? The judge says that it can be included after Diddy's defense team had been trying to have it not included.
This case is far more than just a celebrity scandal. It's a brutal legal showdown where the US government is using powerful laws typically reserved for organized crime to target a figure who built an empire on fame and influence. The prosecution is working to pull back the curtain on what they allege was a hidden abusive enterprise, while the defense is fighting fiercely to frame the accusations as distorted gossip and normal industry practices. As this trial unfolds, under intense media scrutiny and public debate, it forces us to confront difficult questions about power dynamics, accountability, and the blurred lines between acceptable behavior and alleged criminal conduct in the highest echelons of fame and fortune. The jury will face the monumental task of deciding if the accusations leveled against Sean Diddy Combs cross that line, a decision that will not only determine his fate, but potentially send a powerful message about whether celebrity and wealth can truly shield anyone from the reach of federal law. The world is watching to see what secrets the courtroom will ultimately reveal and what the future holds for one of music's most dominant figures.
So according to People magazine, they said prosecutors recently filed a motion disputing any testimony that might show that Sean Diddy Combs didn't have, quote, the mental capacity to commit the crimes he's accused of because of the effects of drugs or alcohol. The motion filed on April 27th references apparent testimony from a psychiatrist on behalf of the defense and asked the judge to prevent his testimony during Combs.
At trial, Combs will ditch the jail garb and wear ordinary clothes, as his lawyers argue the evidence shows consenting adults being intimate in their own way.
We have the latest from federal court in the Sean Combs criminal case. Status of jury selection, what Diddy's going to be wearing, violation of a gag order, rejecting a plea offer.